Hi, welcome to the Justice for Georgia podcast. I'm your host, Johnny, with the co-star Britt.
Hey, Johnny. Thank you for letting me fill in for Mr. Ambitious this week. He'll be back next week, you guys. So we're talking about Marcus Garvey.
So Marcus Garvey, and you have to remember, this guy was a character. He dressed like a straight up general, like the whole get up and everything. He had other people that were involved in the organization dressing in like military uniforms, stuff like that. They would do like military parades and stuff like that. So this guy, he was a character. But yes, he was very, very pro-black. It caused a lot of issues because a lot of people, the NAACP for instance, they felt like he was getting in their way because basically the NAACP was arguing for integration. We want to be integrated, we want to be equal. And he was arguing that's never going to happen. I just want to be separate. So he definitely bumped heads with a lot of black people. And honestly, sometimes you can understand why people bump heads with them because, again, I believe integration is the better option. And there's still people to this day, the back to Africa movement never died. Like, there's still people to this day that, they're saying we need to go back, or people in other instances saying that we need to get land here or something like that.
Well, as an organizer, and I know as an organizer that, yes, while we're on the street and we'll say Black Lives Matter, there's still some people who will come to us and say, why are you trying to fight for justice here? Why are you trying to work on it here? You'll never get it here. We're supposed to go back to Africa. And Johnny and I have to always defend ourselves as well as the other families and be like, well, it happened here, 1. 2, we're from here. And 3, we're not against the whole back to Africa movement as far as, a society that is for the upliftment of black people. But at the same time, as far as segregation, I myself am someone who is completely against segregation, discrimination of any kind, of any sorts. It's what I'm fighting against. So why would I add that towards my movement and be against other people or segregate myself from other people? Doesn't really make sense. But also another thing is that apparently people had issues with him saying Negro.
Yeah, so Marcus Garvey preferred the term Negro, which a lot of people had issues with. And strangely enough, what they preferred back then was color, actually. Because that was the term. And he was like, no, we don't want to go by color, we want to go by Negro. And some of them didn't like Negro either. And I think it's interesting because it went from color being acceptable, then to be unacceptable, Negro being acceptable, still kind of like an argument over is it acceptable or not. And then we moved into, the Black Power movement where we had been called black before, but it was offensive. It was supposed to be an insult, but then we took it and made it something positive. But there were still people who disagree with that. And then you move forward, you have African American, which some people prefer that, and some people are just like, don't call me that. Personally, I just prefer the term black.
Black on black cues, buddy. But we're not gonna get copyrighted. Anyway, of course, I prefer black to our African, or I'm not gonna lie, as far as a term of endearment, my nigga, what's good? It is what it is. At the same time, it seems like colored is coming back as a term when it comes to us. And I am 100% against colored.
So
I hate how that sounds.
I just want to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with black people, obviously that has like a really negative history. So you're going to hear a lot of black people say, don't call us colored, whatever. But the way the term is coming back, basically people were saying minorities before, and now instead of minorities, they're trying to call everyone under that umbrella term people of color. So I just want to say I understand what they're trying to do, but also don't think it's necessary.
Record scratch. If I bring a 2-year-old in here and say, would you like colored pencils? Do you know what colors are in colored pencils? White, black, brown, orange, yellow, purple, red, all that stuff, right? So then why would I myself just be like, okay, yeah, you can call me colored when we're all of color because our skin are different pigments, which is color. I'm against it. When I look at the civil rights movement and the time that we fought for, they had white signs, white only, black signs, colored only. It was literally meant to make us seem like we're a mark, we're a shade in society. You got me twisted. pretty much. So I don't like the term colored. And there have been people who come to us at the protest who are like, I support people of color, and you're not going to get the cute in the arms of an angel from me. You're going to get, I don't like that. My name is Britt, nice to meet you. And also, I'm black. Black lives matter, Negro lives matter, Negus lives matter, niggas lives matter. But at the same time, you cannot say colored because it's literally meant to call us a shade in society, a mark in society, and we're not that. We belong, basically.
So there's another parallel for this as well. I would say well-meaning terms that are like, controversial. Another one is Latinx. For Latinos, because when you talk to white actors, stuff like that, they'll almost all use Latinx. You'll meet some Latinos that will use Latinx, but then I feel like I meet more that are like, don't call us that. That doesn't make sense in Spanish. Why would we ever refer to ourselves as that? So it's one of those things where it's like it's well-meaning, but also it's like it's not really necessary. Like I feel like basically if the people who are at the center of it, if they're not the ones saying like we need this. Then why do it? So
who was the black person that said we need to be called colored? Because we need to have a conversation. Email JusticeForGA@gmail.com.
Well, moving back to Marcus Garvey. So we pretty much we covered a lot of things about him, things he accomplished. The summit at Madison Square Garden, that was huge. People from all over the world. At this time in history, he was basically looked at as one of the most famous black men in the world. And he also had a lot of enemies, the NAACP, W.B. Du Bois. He called him, he said he was like on the white man's payroll or something like that. So we said about W.B. Du Bois. Yeah, exactly.
Spicy.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he was a character. But pretty much after the summit, that put a lot of fear into pretty much every country that had something to do with colonization. So you had the U.S., you had Great Britain, you had Italy, you had France. They all had their intelligence agencies working around the clock, keep tabs on him, figure out what he's doing. There were assassination attempts and stuff like that. Because
I'm not even surprised.
Yeah, because like again, we already covered it, but even though we disagree with him basically becoming like an African dictator, to me, in my opinion, the idea of a unified Africa fighting back against colonizers, like that was like the strongest thing that really, the continent could come up with. And I think this is where, those colonizers came together and they were like, we can't have him doing this. So that's why all those things happened. He also started a shipping company. Basically, he wanted to have a fleet, and he felt like once they had a country established, like it has to have a fleet, right? That like every country has their fleet. At this time period, it was a big deal. There wasn't, you weren't having like planes flying around delivering goods and stuff. It was ships. Ships were how things got around the world. Mm-hmm. So he built this company, building up the ships and everything like that, getting black people to invest in it. And this was a huge deal. There weren't any black people in the U.S. owning ships or even black captains. Like this was really.
No, it sounds like he had a lot of progressive and good ideas at the same time. The segregation message, and the way that you went about it, like, okay, well, let me request. Thankfully, he didn't do a Christopher Columbus on Africa, because Africa would have been ready. Sorry, but thankfully he didn't do that. At the same time, though, even just requesting, okay, we need this land to do this, rather than, okay, I have this idea. I'm not from Africa. Let me respect the culture by meeting with leaders. Maybe even living there for a few years, seeing what it's like for myself, learning the military for myself. If you're so pro-military for Africa, then it would seem like your efforts would be in building the military that's already in Africa.
As I said, you can still see his influence all over the place. And even now, today, I'm not going to give Marcus Garvey credit, but you're starting to see more African countries trying to come together as a trade bloc. Because if we're being honest, Africa's like the next, even though it's a continent, it's kind of like the next China, where the economic growth is going to be rapid. It's going to take off. That's going to be like where you're going to see people's lifestyles change dramatically overnight, and the trade bloc that they're forming is probably the best way to protect that. So the idea of a unified Africa, definitely a great idea, especially to fight off colonizers. U.S., for example, there were some Marines that were actually killed in some type of battle in Africa, but it's just kind of like, why are we there? Colonizer shit. And same thing with China. The Belt and Road Initiative, they're not building roads out of generosity. They're trying to put countries in debt to be paying them back when these countries are getting wealthier, which they know is coming. So I think still his vision of a unified Africa, it was a great idea, even if they don't necessarily need the unified militaries, even just the unified trade bloc. If they could get every African nation in the trade bloc, which they have the major ones, Nigeria, Ethiopia, they have like the major countries in this trade bloc. But I think they get every country in there, they could be an economic force when it comes to trading with, China, the U.S., various other Asian nations and stuff like that. So I think the future is bright for unified Africa, and in that aspect, I felt like he had a great idea there, but again, he was a controversial figure for a reason.
I will say, as a Nigerian, as a proud Nigerian, the finances in Africa is actually very well. There's a lot of prosperous areas in Africa. My background is Igbo, but at the same time, Lagos is one of those where prosperity is just overflowing and stuff like that. At the same time, the military, if you're saying that you want to, Marcus Garvey is saying that he wants to unify the military to fight off the threat of future colonizers, then we may want to fix the military in Africa as well, because as we know, NSARS has been happening right now, and for years, decades, there's been a lot of controversy with a lot of the leaders in Africa. I know that this is Justice for Georgia, but as far as the NSARS movement, we are with you in spirit to all the people who are fighting for their rights, and I am so sorry to everything that's going on with you guys. But the military in Africa, there's a lot of controversy that's happening right there too. So if anything, for all those people who are following in Marcus Garvey's footsteps, and if you really want to help Africa out, move there. Learn the culture first though. Learn how the military really is, because there's a lot of self-oppression that's going on, and there's a lot of self-hate, self-racism, and self-discrimination going on in Africa as well. So again, Johnny and I are with you guys in Africa. Our hearts are with you guys for the NSARS movement, and we're definitely standing with you guys. And for those who are pro-Africa, remember to really show Africa love. There's ways you can do that. You can research the organizations who are involved in the NSARS movement, and you can help uplift them right now, because if that's your true calling and if that's really in your heart, don't try to colonize and take over so that your name could be written in books and you could be made the person. That's when you got to look at what your real deal is about. Like what are you really coming for? You need to learn the culture, embrace the culture, then work with the culture to build that culture up. But if you're from West Side Atlanta like me, we have our issues here too, and we belong here as well. And we have so much going on as far as systematic racism, even, to the point of corporate racism, even to the point of banking racism that's going on. There's so much that's going on. There's so much white supremacist issues happening right here. So just like how Africa deserves our fight and all our love, at the same time you have to fight for where you're from, especially if you're going to have kids here too. Fight for their generation. Fight for the generation after them. Not everyone is going to go with you to move to Africa, unfortunately. So what are you going to do for that young man or young woman that's looking up to you as you're leading?
Another part of Marcus Garvey's legacy that we see today is just this year they celebrated the 100th anniversary of his summit at Madison Square Garden. And what made this event very interesting to me is that his son was actually there. in person. So I thought that was a pretty interesting thing, like to have all these black leaders again come together, talk about, you know, Back to Africa movement, the possibility of that, unifying different black people and blah blah blah. And obviously this summit wasn't as militant as Garvey would have been. He would have had people with, you know, black people with guns and uniforms marching down the street with him on the back of a car and his general get up. You know,
see, you had me with the marching in the street, not the back of the car.
Because he wanted to, so basically, and you know, all the sources say he learned this from the British. He liked to put on a show to show people like, oh, you know, we have a sense of authority or a sense of power and stuff like that. Because the British did it all the time. If British colonized a country, you bet like they had soldiers marching up and down with guns, and they have their general just like
I think
that.
that's pretty amazing. And you see that practice in a lot of the organizations that we see today with the Black Revolutionaries and the Revolutionary Black Panther Party and then the NFAC. I think that social disturbance is an amazing thing. Your message though.
Yeah.
It's like, what's your message? And I'm not talking about those organizations. They have great messages from what I know of a lot of them. But I'm talking about as far as the whole like go back to Africa message. Let's further segregate ourselves message. I think it's amazing though that everyone gathered and that his son was there. That shows you that the legacy isn't too far. So I think that's pretty dope.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And I think the main takeaway is that even, let's say, the Black Revolutionaries, their you know, demonstrations they've done, it's been extremely effective. You know, it goes viral like wildfire, which means more people know about them, which means they can spread the message further. So that type of militant show is super useful. But as you said, we want to make sure people have the right message.
So, with all of that being said, thank you for educating me, by the way, on Marcus Garvey. Our action items for this week is to show some Black pride, as well as show love to a lot of your local organizers out here. A lot of us, we're just trying to make things better, and even though some of us may have a controversial way of doing it, it's all with a good heart at the end of the day. So show your Black pride, as well as getting out there and showing love to your leaders out here who are trying to make a better tomorrow for you and yours.
Mr. Ambitious will be back next week, and we'll have our regular scheduled program. This is Johnny and our guest star Britt. This is Just for Georgia, signing off.